Hello everybody, my name is Daulton Nelson, and today I'd like to give my thoughts on a game I just beat. That game being Hell Yeah! Wrath of the Dead Rabbit for the PC. Hell Yeah! is a post-Metroidvanian action game developed by Arkido and published by Sega. Sometimes I see games I like and I buy them, and other times games just seem to fall in my lap. Hell Yeah! is a game in the latter category. I got this game from a free giveaway Sega was doing for Jet Set Radio on the PC, and of course, I picked it up because why wouldn't I? And with Jet Set Radio came Hell Yeah! The game seemed interesting when given a passive glance, but I ended up putting off it and Jet Set Radio due to a laptop that could run neither at the time. And so, here we are, years later. I have a better laptop, and this channel is now focused on game reviews, so I had more than enough reason to pick up and play Hell Yeah! As I mentioned earlier, as soon as you start playing the game, Hell Yeah!'s unique visual style is immediately notable. Everything is very animated, and the quality of the art is impressively drawn. All of this art is filtered through the silly, almost immature tone. This tone makes its way to the story of the game as well. Hell Yeah! is about a rabbit prince named Ash, who has his nudes leaked. These pictures make their way to the denizens of Hell. Soon, they reach 100 views. Thus, Ash goes out into Hell to kill all 100 fiends who have seen his glamour shots. What follows is an action game that has a more explorative edge to it. The environments and progression layout is very similar to a Metroidvania. The closest game I can compare it to is Metroid 2: Return of Samus. Like that game, your progression relies more on killing a certain amount of boss enemy types. In Ash's case, he'll run into doors that explicitly tell him how many of Hell's creatures he needs to kill for it to open. And this makes for some interesting gameplay. For the most part, these boss enemies will be out in the open. The method you need to employ to kill them will often require some sort of gimmick to it, like having to kill them with the environment or with a ranged attack. When you kill them, these bosses will be logged, with their names, a description of them, and their monetary value all present for you to view. They'll also be sent to this island that you can access in the main menu, where you can assign them to stations where they'll give you more health, money, and items. It's a neat thing that runs in the background, and something you can check on in the beginning and end of your play sessions. There's a nice variety to these enemy types in how you deal with them and in their visual design. A majority of these monsters are unique, with only a few variations or color palette swaps popping up every so often. When you damage a boss enough, you'll have to complete a WarioWare-esque minigame. These are little half-minute at most challenges where you'll have to do things like mash a button or pick the right option. Like the bosses, there's a good handful of these minigames, and they're spread out enough so that repeats don't show up next to each other. If you win this minigame, a cutscene will play where the boss you damaged will be killed brutally by something that is contextually related to the game you just played. After this scene, the boss will explode in blood, and will be counted in your kills. It's a neat visual finisher, and works with the game's puerile energy. If you lost the minigame, however, you'll be damaged, and the boss gets to live. But that boss will have low health, so you can damage them and try the game again very quickly. I like what these minigames bring to Hell Yeah! Overall, but with the amount of bosses, the pool of minigames do bring out some lackluster showings. This can apply to the bosses themselves. While most of the bosses are simple, some of the methods required to kill them can be obtuse and poorly communicated, and some can be outright unfulfilling, as some don't require you to do much of anything. And while we're talking about things being obtuse, I think for the most part Hell Yeah!'s progression can be easy to follow, although there are parts later on in the game where things become a little too disconnected, or where mechanics just aren't communicated to the player, like for example the vortexes that show up in the museum world. Things also seem to level out near the midpoint of the game, where the game seems to just run out of new things to present to the player. Thus, the game just coasts at this difficulty that the players adjust to and will become bored by. And all of this leads to a very clumsy ending that's less a satisfying wrap-up, and more of a point where the developers just seem to stop the game and call it an ending. Of course, in addition to the bosses and the Metroidvanian style progression, Hell Yeah is an action game, and with that comes the player's control of Ash. As Ash, players can move and jump. They can also use a, quote, sawing jetpack. What this lets you do is it allows you to drill through certain terrain in the game, as well as drill right into enemies. It also allows you to propel yourself up to higher platforms. It's an interesting addition to the game, and in classic Metroidvania fashion, as you progress through the game, you'll be given upgrades to it and other objects in your possession. You'll also earn money with your kills that you can spend at shops for upgrades. Although I would say that sawing jetpack does contribute to Ash's movement feeling a little floaty, and even a little slippery at times. Plus, the game never really tells you that the saw is a jetpack, so players who don't know so will just think that their jump may be a little too high and loose. In addition to your sawing jetpack, you're given weapons that you can use for ranged attacks. You can go from a machine gun, to a bazooka, to a shotgun, and even a laser cannon. There's quite a few weapons you can pick from, and each feels great to use, especially given each's unique functionality. Although, like the sawing jetpack, these weapons have an annoying downside to them. That would be that the bullets seem to just stop existing as soon as they go off screen. This can cause problems if you're trying to shoot at something that's not in your box of vision, but that thing is still shooting at you. It's a big problem with Hell Yeah's combat. How this wasn't caught in playtesting is beyond me, as I started noticing this issue as soon as I got my first weapon. This isn't helped with the game's dynamic camera that follows Ash. For the most part, this camera will zoom in and out depending on where the developers programmed it to do so. But I don't think the developers fine-tuned this enough, as certain areas that are required to have the camera be zoomed out a bit more instead saw the camera give the players less eye room to work with. And I think overall the camera is too zoomed in for all cases. And while I'm touching on the visual nature of the game, the detailed art style of the game can be too much. There are lots of moving parts and colors that catch the eye, so much so that at the most important parts of the game, it can be hard to discern a focal point. There were bosses where I literally could not focus because of all of the things going on in the scene view. Finally, I thought the audio mix used in the game was a little muddy. There were times where certain sound effects were too loud or quiet, and some of the music tracks weren't very dynamic. It made for a very odd listening experience while playing the game. After playing through Hell Yeah, I think it has a strong opening to it, and I think its style and attitude carries it enough to be memorable, but there are also a lot of things working against the game, and as the game goes on, it seems to fall apart. So I'm going to give it a final score of a low 6 out of 10. I feel positive about Hell Yeah. I think it's a game worth playing. It's good fun. It has lots of moments of quality, but also it has its moments of baffling design decisions or boring monotony. That concludes my review of Hell Yeah. If you like my reviews, you can like, comment, or subscribe. I also have social media links down in the description below, as well as a link to my portfolio where you can see video game design works that I have done, as well as a link to my Backloggd profile where you can see my scores. And with that out of the way, please make sure to have a nice day.